Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. It's been 2 decades, 2 whole decades of a life shared with Olivia, my wife. We've seen the best and the worst of times together, but nothing prepared me for the earth-shattering revelation that was about to unfold. That day, the sun had barely peeked over the horizon when I left for work. The usual hustle of the city seemed more pronounced, the honking of cars, the distant siren of an ambulance, a symphony of daily life that I navigated through. At 42, I had become a successful businessman, the kind who wore suits tailored to perfection and watches that cost a fortune. But none of that glimmer or gloss could have shielded me from what was lying in wait. It was a Thursday, an ordinary Thursday, or so I thought, until I stumbled upon a secret that had been concealed for a decade. The day unfolded like any other, with meetings lined up one after the other, each demanding my unwavering focus. But amidst this chaos, my mind kept drifting back to Olivia. Everything all right, Ethan? My assistant, Tom, a sharp young man with a keen sense of perception, noticed my preoccupation. Yeah, just the usual whirlwind, I replied, trying to brush off my unease with a half-hearted smile. Returning home that evening, I was greeted by the familiar sight of our 2-story house, the one with the white picket fence and a garden Olivia loved tending to. But something felt off. The lights were dim, the curtains drawn, and an unsettling silence enveloped the place. I called out for Olivia and Emma, our 17-year-old daughter, but was met with silence. It was then I noticed Olivia's purse on the dining table, its contents spilled over like a scene from a crime novel. Curious, I walked over and saw amidst the usual lipstick, a hairbrush, some crumpled receipts, a folded piece of paper. It was a letter addressed to Olivia, but what it contained made my heart stop. Words of love and longing, but not from me. From someone else. Someone she had been seeing for the past 10 years. I felt my knees weaken, the paper crumpling in my clenched fist. This couldn't be happening. Not to us. Not after everything we've been through. As I stood there, trying to process the magnitude of this betrayal, I heard the front door open. Olivia walked in, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Ethan, you're home early," she said, a tinge of surprise in her voice. I couldn't speak. The letter in my hand was a silent testament to a truth I couldn't voice. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her brows furrowing in concern. "How could you, Olivia?" The words escaped me before I could stop them, laced with a pain so raw, so real. "What are you talking about?" Confusion clouded her face as she noticed the letter in my hand. I thrust the letter at her, watching as her eyes scanned the words, her face draining of color. "Who is he, Olivia?" 10 years. 10 years. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant echo of our clock ticking, marking the passing seconds of a life I thought I knew. I can explain," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. But could she? Could anything justify a decade of lies, of living a double life? This was just the beginning, the unveiling of a secret so deep, so painful, that it threatened to unravel everything I had ever believed in. My marriage, my family, my very sense of reality, all hanging by a thread that had just started to unravel. In the early years of our marriage, Olivia and I were inseparable. We were those high school sweethearts everyone looked at and said, "They'll make it through anything." And for a while, we believed it too. The memory of those days feels like watching a movie of a different life. Back then, we lived in a modest apartment, the kind with creaky floorboards and a leaky faucet that we would jokingly say added character. Our evenings were spent huddled on the sofa, Olivia's head resting on my shoulder, laughing over some sitcom or planning our future, which seemed so bright and full of possibilities. "Ethan, we're going to have it all," Olivia would say, her eyes sparkling with ambition and love. A big house, a happy family, a life full of adventures. I would wrap my arm around her, pulling her closer. "As long as we're together, Liv, that's all the adventure I need." But as time marched on, the pressures of life began to weigh heavily on us. I started my own business, driven by the dream of providing a life of comfort and luxury for Olivia and our future family. The initial days were grueling. I would leave before the sun was up and return long after it had set, my mind constantly occupied with strategies, meetings, and the relentless pursuit of success. One evening, I came home to find Olivia sitting at the dining table, a somber look on her face. "Liv, what's wrong?" I asked, concern etching my voice. "It's just, you're always working, Ethan." I feel like I'm living alone here, she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. I know, and I'm sorry, but this is for our future, for the dreams we talked about. Once the business takes off, I'll have more time. I promise. But as my business grew, so did the distance between us. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and dreams, became strained and infrequent. The light in Olivia's eyes dimmed, replaced by a quiet resignation. I tried to bridge the gap, to reconnect with the woman I loved, but the more I reached out, the further she seemed to drift away. One night, I decided to surprise Olivia with a dinner date, thinking maybe all we needed was a night to ourselves. I got home early, bought her favorite flowers, and dressed up in the suit she always said I looked handsome in. Surprise! I thought we could go out for dinner, just the two of us, I said with a hopeful smile as I presented her with the flowers. Olivia looked up, surprised but not in the way I had hoped. Ethan, I have plans with Sarah tonight. I can't cancel on her. Disappointment washed over me, but I tried not to show it. It's okay, maybe some other time. As the months rolled into years, the emotional gulf widened. The birth of our daughter, Emma, brought a brief respite, a joyous interlude in a marriage that was slowly crumbling. Emma was our little bundle of joy, her laughter filling the house with a warmth that had been missing. But even Emma's arrival couldn't mend the growing rift. My long hours meant I missed her first steps, her first words. I would come home to find her asleep, her tiny form a reminder of all the moments I was missing. Ethan, Emma keeps asking for you, Olivia said one evening, her voice hollow. She barely sees her father. Her words stung, a piercing reminder of the cost of my absence. I'm doing this for her, for us, I said, a familiar defense. But at what cost? We're losing you, Ethan, Olivia replied, tears brimming in her eyes. I wanted to say something to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I walked away, my mind a whirlwind of guilt and frustration. The struggles and distance that marked those years were like a slow poison, seeping into the very foundation of our marriage. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something irreversible, something that could shatter the fragile facade of the life we had built together. The arrival of our daughter, Emma, was like a beacon of light in the thickening gloom of our marriage. She was a beautiful, sprightly child, with Olivia's eyes and my stubborn chin. I remember holding her for the first time in the hospital, her tiny hand gripping my finger, a surge of love and protectiveness overwhelming me. In that moment, I vowed to give her the world, to be the father she deserved. Yet, as Emma grew, so did the demands of my business. The days stretched into endless meetings, negotiations, and business trips. I was building an empire, but at home, my kingdom was crumbling. Daddy, will you be home for my birthday? Emma's voice would crackle through the phone during my business trips. Princess, Daddy will try his best, okay? I'll bring you a big present, I'd promise, feeling a pang of guilt with each word. Okay, Daddy, I love you. Her innocent acceptance only sharpened the ache in my heart. At home, the situation with Olivia had deteriorated. We were like two ships passing in the night, barely speaking, the distance between us filled with unspoken grievances and pent-up frustrations. One particularly late night, I returned home to find Olivia sitting in the dark living room, a glass of wine in hand, her expression unreadable. Olivia, why are you sitting in the dark? I asked, switching on the light. She blinked against the sudden brightness, her eyes avoiding mine. It doesn't make much difference to you, does it? Whether I'm in the dark or light, you hardly notice. I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. I know I've been busy, but I'm doing this for us. For us? Or for you, Ethan? Olivia's voice was sharp, a stark contrast to her usual calm demeanor. It's not just about me. It's about providing for our family, for Emma's future. But what about now, Ethan? What about her present? She needs her father, not just his money. The conversation quickly escalated as years of frustration and loneliness poured out. We were arguing, not just about my absence, but about everything that had gone unsaid over the years. Our voices rose, words like arrows, each one hitting its mark. In the midst of our heated exchange, a small voice pierced through the tension. Mommy, Daddy, please stop shouting. We turned to see Emma standing at the foot of the stairs, her small figure dwarfed by the shadows, her eyes wide and frightened. Immediately, the anger dissipated, replaced by shame. We had promised ourselves we'd never fight in front of Emma, yet here we were, breaking that promise. Baby, come here, Olivia said, her voice softening as she opened her arms to Emma. I watched them, a lump forming in my throat. This wasn't the family life I had envisioned. This wasn't the father I wanted to be. The next morning, I tried to make amends. I sat at the breakfast table with Emma, attempting to engage in her world. Did you draw this, Emma? I asked, pointing to a crayon drawing on the fridge. Yeah, it's our family. But you're not in it because you're always working, she said, her words innocent yet cutting deep. I looked at the drawing, Olivia and Emma holding hands under a bright sun, a noticeable gap where I should have been. I'm sorry, Emma. I'll try to be home more, I promised, a promise I desperately wanted to keep. But as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, my presence at home didn't improve. Work consumed me, and the gap in Emma's drawing seemed to grow wider. Our home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and silent. Olivia and I had become like strangers, coexisting under the same roof for Emma's sake. We avoided each other, conversations limited to what was necessary for Emma's care. I could see the toll it was taking on Emma. She became quieter, her bright spark dimming. Guilt gnawed at me every time I looked at her, a constant reminder of what I was missing, of what I was losing. In this chapter of our lives, our family was torn apart, not by a single event, but by a series of choices and circumstances. The dream of a happy family was slipping through my fingers, and I felt powerless to stop it. The foundation of our marriage was cracking, and I feared what lay ahead if we couldn't find a way to bridge the growing chasm between us. The tension in our house had become like a thick fog, tangible and suffocating. Olivia and I were like two actors playing out the roles of a married couple, void of the love that once bound us together. The smiles were forced, the conversations superficial. And then came the day that broke whatever semblance of normalcy we were clinging to. It was a chilly evening in November, the kind where the wind howls like a lonely wolf and the trees shiver in response. I had just returned from another grueling day at the office, my mind a whirlpool of business strategies and client meetings. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped in, the kind of quiet that screams louder than any noise. Olivia? Emma? I called out but was met with silence. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I walked into the kitchen. There, on the table, lay an open laptop, Olivia's laptop. What caught my eye wasn't the screen filled with emails, but the pictures scattered across the desktop background. Pictures of Olivia, but not with me or Emma. They were with another man, their closeness unmistakable. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, each beat echoing the betrayal I was staring at. I heard footsteps and turned to see Olivia standing in the doorway, her face pale as if she had seen a ghost. Ethan, This isn't what it looks like, she stammered, her eyes darting to the laptop and then back to me. Isn't it? Then what is it, Olivia? Because it looks like you're having an affair. My voice rose, a mixture of anger, pain, and disbelief. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, her usual composed demeanor crumbling. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way. Find out? So, it's true. I felt like the room was spinning, the walls closing in on me. Yes, it's true. But it's not just about the affair, Ethan. It's about us, about how distant we've become. I slammed my fist on the table, the sound reverberating through the room. Distant? So, your solution was to find comfort in someone else's arms. It wasn't planned, Ethan. I was lonely. You were always busy with work. He was there when I needed someone. I shook my head in disbelief, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. So that makes it okay? To throw away our marriage, our family? We threw it away long before this, Ethan. We just didn't want to admit it. Her words hit me like a physical blow. It was true, our marriage had been on rocky grounds for a long time, but I never thought she would do something like this. Who is he, Olivia? Someone I know. She hesitated, then whispered, It's Michael, from my book club. Michael. I knew him, a family friend. The realization added another layer of betrayal to the already painful revelation. And Emma? Does she know about this? Olivia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, she doesn't. I didn't want her to know. I didn't want any of this to happen. I felt a surge of anger and helplessness. Our family, the life we had built, was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The trust one had in Olivia, in us, had been shattered into a million pieces. We stood there in the kitchen, the air thick with unspoken words and broken promises. The revelation of Olivia's affair was more than just an act of betrayal. It was a mirror reflecting the reality of our failed marriage, a confrontation of the love that had once been the cornerstone of our lives, now reduced to a pile of rubble. In that moment, I realized that the path ahead was uncertain, filled with difficult choices and painful truths. The confrontation and revelation had torn open a wound that had been festering for years, And now we were left with the aftermath, a family torn apart, struggling to find a way through the debris of a once happy life. The days that followed the revelation were like walking through a thick fog, each step uncertain, each breath heavy with the weight of betrayal. The air in our home was tense, a constant reminder of the chasm that had opened up between Olivia and me. Our interactions were minimal, words spoken only when necessary, mostly about Emma's needs. One particular evening, the tension reached its peak. I had come home earlier than usual, intending to spend some time with Emma. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. I found Emma in the living room, her eyes glued to the TV, a barrier against the unease that filled the house. "Hey, princess," I greeted, trying to inject some warmth into my voice. "Hi, Daddy," she replied, her eyes flickering with a hint of the joy that used to light them up whenever I was around. "Is your mom around?" I asked, my gaze avoiding the spot where Olivia's picture stood on the mantel. "She's in the kitchen," Emma said, her voice dropping a notch, sensing the undercurrents. I walked into the kitchen to find Olivia standing by the stove, her back to me. The clattering of the pots and pans filled the silence between us. "Olivia, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. She turned off the stove and faced me, her expression guarded. "About what? Ethan? Is there anything left to say?" "About us, about where we go from here. We can't keep living like this, especially not for Emma." Olivia sighed, a sound of resignation. "What do you suggest, Ethan? That we pretend everything is fine?" "No, not pretend. But we need to find a way to coexist, for Emma's sake." The conversation soon escalated, our words fueled by hurt and frustration. The kitchen became a battleground, our voices rising over the sound of the simmering pot on the stove. "You think I wanted this? To fall for someone else?" Olivia's voice was laced with a mixture of anger and pain. "I don't know what to think anymore, Olivia. All I know is that you broke our family. You broke us. And what about you, Ethan? You were never around. You were lost in your work, ignoring your family." Her accusation stung, the truth in her words slicing through me. Yes, I was absent, but did that justify her betrayal? As our argument reached its peak, Emma's voice cut through the tension. "Stop it. Just stop it." She stood at the kitchen doorway, her small frame trembling, tears streaming down her face. The sight of her, so hurt and vulnerable, was like a punch to the gut. What were we doing? In our own pain and anger, we had forgotten the most important person in our lives, our daughter. "Emma, baby, I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking as I moved towards her. Just don't," she said, backing away. "I hate this. I hate all of this." She ran out of the room, her footsteps echoing through the house. Olivia and I stood there, the remnants of our argument hanging in the air, the weight of what we were doing to our daughter pressing down on us. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Olivia and I sat in the living room, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. "We can't go on like this, Ethan. It's destroying Emma," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know, but I don't know how to fix this, Liv. I don't know if it can be fixed. We need to make a decision, Ethan. For Emma." The breaking point had been reached, the crossroads of our marriage laid bare before us. The choices we faced were not easy, each path fraught with pain and uncertainty. But one thing was clear, we couldn't continue down the road we were on. For the sake of our daughter, for the remnants of the love we once shared, we had to find a way forward, even if it meant walking separate paths. The days following our heated confrontation were a blur. The house felt like a ghost of its former self, filled with silent echoes of a family that once was. Olivia and I moved around each other like specters, barely speaking, the air thick with the unsaid and the undone. One morning, as I sipped my coffee, staring blankly at the newspaper, Emma walked into the kitchen. She seemed different, more composed than the night she fled from our argument. "Daddy, can we talk?" Her voice, usually so full of life, was steady but somber. "Of course, princess," I replied, setting the newspaper aside. She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine. "I know things aren't good between you and Mom. And I know about the affair." The fact that Emma knew about Olivia's affair was a jolt. I had hoped to shield her from that truth, at least for a while longer. "Emma, I'm sorry you had to know about that," I stammered, feeling a surge of guilt. "It's not your fault, Daddy. But I think, maybe it's time for a change." Her words hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Emma, our little girl, was suggesting the unthinkable, the end of our family as we knew it. "What do you mean, Emma?" "I mean, maybe it's better if you and Mom, if you're not together. I hate seeing you both so unhappy. It's like living in a house with no soul." Her words were like a mirror reflecting the pain and turmoil we had tried to hide from her. I reached out, pulling her into a hug, feeling her small arms wrap around me. "You're right, Emma. Your mom and I. We need to figure things out. But no matter what, we both love you. That will never change." She nodded against my chest, her body shaking with silent sobs. The decision to separate from Olivia wasn't easy. It felt like admitting defeat, like giving up on a dream that we had both cherished. But Emma's words had opened my eyes to the reality that our marriage was causing more harm than good. The day I decided to leave, I packed my bags, each item a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Olivia watched in silence, her face a mask of mixed emotions. "Ethan, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice quivering. "I think it's for the best, Liv. For all of us. But where will you go?" "I've rented an apartment downtown. I need some space to think, to start over. And Emma, she'll stay with you. I'll come to see her, of course. I won't let her feel my absence." Olivia nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I never wanted it to end this way, Ethan." "Neither did I, Liv. But sometimes, starting over is the only way forward." As I walked out of the house, my heart felt heavy, a mix of sorrow, regret, and a flicker of hope for a new beginning. The drive to my new apartment was a journey of reflection, each mile a step away from a life that was no longer mine. The apartment was small, a stark contrast to the home I had shared with Olivia and Emma. But in its simplicity, I found a sense of peace, a blank canvas on which to paint the next chapter of my life. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a routine, the days marked by work and the evenings spent in the quiet solitude of my apartment. Emma would visit, her laughter a balm to my aching heart. We would talk, play games, and for those few hours, the world seemed a little less broken. As I lay in bed each night, staring at the ceiling, I would think about Olivia, about the love we once shared, and the life we built together. Letting go wasn't easy, but sometimes, love isn't enough to heal the wounds of time and distance. This new beginning was not what I had envisioned for my life, but it was a chance to find happiness again, both for myself and for Emma. In the stillness of my new home, I realized that sometimes, the end of one story is just the start of another, and that hope, like the dawn, always follows the darkest night.